Hey, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. This is Chad from Ascension Worship. This week we're going to go over three things that I suggest that you do every time you get behind a digital mixer.
Hey, what do you say? Yes, it's that time again. It's Tech Tuesday.
All right, guys, this video is going to be helpful for a lot of you guys, but I think especially for any of you who maybe are on a rotation for sound at your church and maybe you don't get the chance to mix every single week. And so you have to kind of find yourself every time you get behind the board. But even with that, this is something I do every time I get behind the mixer. The first thing I do, apart from turning the power on for the board, every time I get behind the digital mixer, the first thing I do is I save a B4 scene. Now, you can call this whatever you want. I just call it B4 because that's really easy and quick to name. But essentially, a B4 scene is the current state of the console. Now, hopefully you won't need to use this, but when you do, you're going to be glad that you heard me tell you to do this, because I can't tell you how many times I've been kind of in the midst of things, and all of a sudden the worship leader remembers, oh, hey, Chad, I forgot to tell you, last week we rerouted the live stream. I need you to work off of the old mix that was on the board. And maybe the person who mixed last week didn't save it, or they saved it, but we don't know the name of it, and that person's not there because you're there. So no worries, because you saved a scene that says B4, and you can go right back to that scene, and it's like you never did anything. You're right back where you need to be to continue on with what you need to do. Very, very helpful safety net to have. Again, hopefully you won't need it, but when you do, you're going to be glad you did it. Step 2, after you have saved a B4 scene, if you are going to load your own scene from the last time that you were mixing, one thing I encourage you to do is to check your scene safes. If you're not familiar with what a scene safe is, it is certain channels or groups of parameters that are safe during a scene load, meaning that if you go to load your scene, these selected things will not be affected. They will keep the information that was on the board before you loaded your scene. I'll give you a common example. Let's say that someone has a scene safe on the main mix of your console, and the person who was mixing last week, for whatever reason, had a really wonky EQ on their main mix. When you go to load your scene, if you have not turned off that scene safe, what will happen is you will get your scene, but with his EQ on your main mix. And that may not work well for what you're trying to do. So you want to go into your console scene safe information and either turn everything off or at least be aware of what is safe. There might be some things you need to keep in there. I'll let you figure that out. But if you actually want your scene in its entirety to load onto your console, you need to turn those scene safes off before you go to load your scene. Finally, step 3, once you have loaded your scene into the board, before you start sound checking the musicians, I highly encourage you to test your outputs. This is especially important if you are a mobile church. It's easy for volunteers to either mix up their connections or forget to plug things in. Maybe you forgot to plug things in. It happens. But the only way you're going to know is if you actually test your outputs. Now, this is also important if you are not a mobile church, if you're an established church, because I can't tell you again how many times people have forgotten to turn the breaker on for the subs. And unless you have an ear for that, or unless you've tested for it, you may not know until sometime later on when you realize there's not really a lot of low end coming out of the sound system. So the way you can test your outputs, if you know how to use the oscillator or signal generator on your console, that is the most effective way. I'll leave a video on how to do that on the Behringer X32. Otherwise, if you don't know how to do that, or if your console doesn't have that option, you can simply play some background music. Make sure it's going to all your different, mains and subs and monitor mixes and all that kind of stuff. And then you're going to want to go and mute all those outputs, and one by one test them, turn them on, make sure you're getting what you should be getting, mute it, go to the next one, and go all the way through. Make sure your left is your left, your right is your right, your sub is your sub, your monitors are your monitors. And then, of course, when you're done, make sure that all that stuff is unmuted so it's ready to go. This is really, really important. I'll give you a practical example. I was at a church very recently. They had accidentally routed all of their monitor mixes also to the main mix. And I was wondering why everything was so loud when I got to their church. Well, the main vocalist, his microphone was essentially being multiplied by 9 because it was coming to the main mix via his channel, but also 8 monitor mixes that had his mic in them as well were all adding to that sound, making everything incredibly loud and hard to control. So testing your outputs is very, very important. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful to someone out there. Again, when you get to the console, 1, save a before scene. 2, if you're going to load your scene, make sure you turn off your scene saves first. And then 3, test your outputs. One addendum, if you happen to be, especially at a mobile church, I mean, I would do this anywhere, but especially a mobile church, also test your inputs. Either use a tablet or have a buddy system with one person at the board or one person on stage, but just make sure that all those inputs are correct. Again, that will help to make sure that your sound check goes smoothly. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful. Until next time, have a great week. Again, this is Chad from Ascension Worship. I hope this has been helpful for you and your team. Come back here every Tuesday for new information.